With the NBA season in full swing, some things for the Los Angeles Clippers have been made very clear. This is a team that can most definitely win at the highest level until Kawhi comes back and make a playoff push as a middle of the pack seed. With Paul Geroge playing like an MVP, the Clippers are competing for a top seed, but it is clear that they have some issues that need to be fixed. Today, we will be going over 3 of the best realistic trades that this Clippers team could make to improve their roster and allow them to get a top seed until Kawhi Leonard returns. And let me just say, the last trade package in this video is a good one, so you'll want to stick around. Before getting into the trades, it is very important to note the good and bad for this Clippers team to start the season. At the time of this recording, the team stands at an even record of 11-11, which is definitely not bad all things considered. This record puts the Clippers within a game or two of teams like the Lakers, Grizzlies, and Mavericks, who all have very similar records up until the 3rd seed in the West. With this win-loss ratio, it's very apparent that the Clippers are able to stay competitive and potentially get a top seed, but what exactly do they need to improve to do so? Well, to put it simply, this Clippers team needs more production on the offensive end of the ball, and if you've been watching this team, you know that this is the case. Don't get me wrong here, like I said, Paul Geroge is playing like an MVP already and has been carrying this team to wins, but PG is basically where the Clippers' production on offense starts and ends, and well, the stats don't lie. So far this season, Paul Geroge has put up tremendous numbers, averaging 26 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists. This is close to MVP type numbers, especially because of the efficiency shooting wise. But let's take a look at the next best offensive player on the team, Reggie Jackson. At the moment, for the most part, Reggie Jackson has been the clear-cut number 2 guy for the Clippers offense, and despite this, he's only averaging 17 points per game so far this season. Now the man has heated up in the past week or two, being that before this stretch he was averaging around 14 points per game. But regardless, it's clear that this Clippers team needs a lot more of an offensive punch so they can stay competitive with other elite offenses. Don't get it twisted because Reggie Jackson has been very good on offense, but the fact that Ivica Zubac is next on the list for offensive production, only averaging 10 points per game, shows this team needs some help. Despite the bad offense, this Clippers team has actually assembled one of the better defensive teams in the league, even without Kawhi Leonard. Taking a look at the best defenders in the NBA so far this season, the LA Clippers actually have 3 players in the top 20 for the best defensive rating so far. Those players being Paul Geroge, Ivica Zubac, and Eric Bledsoe at number 20. Between PG's elite perimeter defense, rim protection by Zubac and Terrence Mann, the Clippers at the moment have the 4th best defensive rating in the league, which makes what this team needs to do for trades very simple. In my eyes, the Clippers simply need to get more offensive firepower without sacrificing defense. This could be in the form of getting an elite 2-way player or giving up some bad defenders for some better offensive production players. A lot of these moves would be under the radar and not seem like a big deal, but let me just say, I think the impact of these moves would be a lot bigger than people think. So with that being said, let's take a look at the first trade package involving the Toronto Raptors. In this trade, the Clippers would send off Eric Bledsoe and Justice Winslow in exchange for Chris Boucher, Goran Dragic, and draft capital if needed. At first glance, this might seem like a not so good trade for the Clippers, being that Bledsoe is in the top 20 for defensive rating like I mentioned. But let me just say, the Clippers would be getting a much better defender and more offensive firepower with the addition of Chris Boucher. For the Clippers, this trade makes 100% sense for them. They ship off Bledsoe, who's been mediocre at best on the offensive end, and Justice Winslow, who at this point has played a very minor role for the team. In exchange, they get 2 great players that the Raptors may be looking to trade. As far as Boucher goes, if you've watched the man hoop, you would know that he is one of the best and most underrated defenders in the league, being that last year he averaged 2 blocks per game, which was tied for 3rd best in the league only behind Clint Capella, Rudy Gobert, and Nerlens Noel. The Clippers do lose a little bit of perimeter defense with this trade, but it is very clear that Boucher has flat out more talent than Bledsoe and can make this team a lot scarier on both sides of the ball. This isn't where it ends for the Clippers though, because they would also be getting Goran Dragic, who would most definitely boost the offense on this team more than Bledsoe. In recent years, Dragic has shown that despite not being a huge name, he can step up when it matters most and be the leader on the offensive end of the ball with his crafty playstyle that often leads to easy buckets. With his time with the Heat, Dragic showed that he can be a very solid offensive player without being a complete defensive liability as well. The veteran leadership would be great for the Clippers, plain and simple. Not to mention, the offensive boost would help this team out a lot. For the Raptors, this might seem like a bad trade, but in my eyes, they make this move to get out of the contract situation with these players. Boucher is on the last year of his deal and likely won't re-sign with the team, being that a lot of contenders will offer the man a bag because of his defense, and Dragic, well, Dragic just isn't on the timeline of this team, who is clearly in a semi-rebuilding mode with Siakam, Barnes, and Van Vliet. The return for the Raptors isn't necessarily great. They get a solid backup guard in Bledsoe, a player in Justice Winslow that could become something if he's properly developed, but most importantly, picks from the Clippers, which is really the only reason why the Raptors would make this deal. The front office of this franchise is not dumb. They will make a trade for at least a little bit of draft capital if they know Boucher isn't re-signing next year. It does hurt for the Clippers that Boucher is on the last year of his deal, but the fact is, this team is in championship or bust mode once Kawhi returns, so adding Boucher's defense would be well worth the pick they'd give up. All in all, this would be a very sneaky trade that the Clippers could realistically make, but the next package is where things get truly interesting. Even though I believe the first trade package is the safest and best bet for the Clippers, there is a chance they make a riskier move for a potentially higher reward. In this instance, to get more offensive firepower, I think one of the better targets for this team is a potential star player that's on the trading block as we speak. You guessed it, I'm talking about Kemba Walker of the Knicks. So far this season, Kemba Walker has been far from what he used to be, being that he's only putting up 12 points per game. And with the Knicks having a stat guard rotation, Walker fell out of the lineup and is now rumored to be on the trading block for the Knicks. If the Clippers are looking to take a risk, this would definitely be the move for them to make because Kemba has shown in the past that he can be an all-star caliber guard. And in case you forgot, let's take a look at the stats. In his all-star year with the Hornets just 3 years ago, Kemba Walker absolutely balled out, averaging 25 points, 6 assists, and 5 rebounds per game. Now, is it likely that Kemba Walker returns to this level of scoring production? Well, not really. But it definitely is possible that he can be a 20-point per game scorer for this Clippers team that needs offense desperately, being that last year he put up 19 points per game with the Celtics. Where things get very interesting with this is the potential trade package though, because at the moment, the Knicks are a team trying to win as much as possible and make it into the playoffs as a top seed. Because of this being the case, if the Knicks were to trade Kemba, they would likely demand at least some type of win now piece. So let's get right into the package that could get this deal done for the Clippers. In this deal, there would likely have to be a third team involved to make the money work for Kemba's mid-level exception type salary. There are many teams that could get involved for this type of trade, but in this trade, the Nuggets are the third team involved. In this deal, the Knicks would send off Kemba Walker to the Clippers would send off Serge Ibaka to the Nuggets, and the Nuggets would send off JaMychal Green and Bol to the Knicks. Overall, even though this is a risky move for the Clippers, in my eyes, it's also a very even trade between all teams. We already know the Kemba Knicks issues, so they simply send him off because they don't need him right now. In exchange, the Knicks receive two very interesting pieces, JaMychal Green, who could be a key player off the bench to help the team out, and Bol, who could be further developed in a spot minutes role until he earns his way into the actual rotation. Both of these guys would be great for the Knicks team in different ways, and for Kemba Walker, I don't think the New York front office would be complaining about this trade. For the Nuggets, as you all know, they took a huge blow recently, losing Michael Porter Jr. to a back injury for the rest of the year. They make this move to get Ibaka, who could most definitely be an MPJ replacement, and come off the bench when he returns next season. Giving up Green and Bol hurts, but the fact is, Bol has already made it clear that he doesn't like being on a team where he gets no opportunity. And JaMychal Green, well, he's just the price to pay for Michael Porter Jr. replacement in Ibaka. All in all, this would benefit every single team involved, but especially the Clippers if Kemba Walker's able to step up and be that guy on the offensive end of the ball like he was just a few years ago. Lastly though, we have an even better trade, a trade that would get the Clippers star power and better their offense and defense, a trade that would make their contending hopes a lot more likely, that being a trade for Christian Wood of the Houston Rockets. If the Clippers truly want to go all in and win out in the next couple of years, in my eyes, a Christian Wood trade would definitely help them do this. In this package, the Clippers would send off Serge Ibaka, Ivica Zubac, and Keon Johnson in exchange for Christian Wood and Daniel Theis of the Rockets. There's a lot to break down with this trade, so before you get mad and run down to the comments, let me just explain first. This is in the case that the Clippers believe they don't have what it takes to win now, even when Kawhi gets back, and well, this could very well be the case. We've seen how stacked the Western Conference is this year, and with new and old teams inserting themselves in championship conversations, the Clippers might feel obligated to make a move to win now, and well, this would do just that. For a small price of Ibaka, Zubac, and Johnson along with some draft capital, this team would get Christian Wood, who at one point was in all-star conversations last year because he was playing so good. With Wood, the Clippers would get a great two-way player that could play the 4 or 5 depending on if they want to go small ball. Not to mention, the man has the ability to score, defend, rebound, and even play make. If you've been watching the channel for a while now, you would know that I am very high on Christian Wood's skill set for a contender, and in this instance, it's no different. Not only that, but the Clippers would also get Daniel Theis, who could play the standard big man position when this team needs it. Theis is a step down on defense from Zubac, but the rebounding is the same. Not to mention, Christian Wood makes up for this on both sides of the ball. For the Rockets, their reason to make this move is plain and simple. It's clear that this team is in no rush to win now, being that they are the absolute worst team in the league, and are even going as far as benching players like John Wall so their young talent can develop. This trade gets rid of some older players on the team like Wood and Theis, who are also on multi-year deals, and in exchange, they get a young center in Zubac that's closer on the timeline of Jalen Green and KPJ, another young guard with potential in Keon Johnson, and an expiring deal in Ibaka that they could either trade or let walk at the end of the season. This trade gets both teams exactly what they want, and even though Christian Wood isn't classified as a superstar by any means, there's no doubt in my mind he would make the Clippers a much better team in the regular and postseason. Let me know down below which trade you would make and what other players the Clippers should target, and if this video gets a good amount of love, I'll make a follow-up video going over the next options for this team. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Woods out.